How's it going, everybody? Getting quite a few requests lately for like certification advice, career advice. Which way should I go? Is I've got a degree, I've got this many years of experience, that type of stuff, and that's all well and good. If you guys have any type of requests that I might be able to help you out with, fire away. One of the most popular things that people ask about is well, certification prep for one, learning new technologies is typically number two. So I think I felt like I should create more or less how I go about doing things. What is my approach? What methods do I use to learn a new technology? How long do I spend on it? Do I master every little protocol level detail of it before I, go out there and record a video on it, stuff like that. Um, when it comes to certification advice, the way that I look at it is like this. The vendor that you're taking the certification in typically has a blueprint. This blueprint is going to provide you with some guidelines. The exam number, it's going to give you the number of, so there's going to be an exam number, there's going to be a number of questions that you're going to see on the test. You're also going to see the topic blueprint that you're going to be tested in. So for instance, if it's VMware, you know that you're going to get tested on, depending on what level of certification you're at, the amount of information that you're going to have to know and to what level you're going to have to know it to. So for instance, VCA, you're gonna have to know a lot of the theory. What is vMotion? What is storage DRS? What is an alarm? What are tags? Things like that. With Cisco, you're gonna have, again, different levels of certification. So you start off at CCENT. It's a lower level certification, which means you don't have to know a lot, but you still have to be knowledgeable in quite a few things. And then they progress up through. So you hit NA, then you hit NP, and then you eventually hit the IE level. Now, do you have to be a CCIE to be really good at something? Absolutely not. I know a lot of really good engineers that aren't certified at all. So to me, it's really, if you never get certified, that's okay. Um, Although when you're looking at certification, especially when you're looking in what they refer to as a value added reseller or a VAR, which basically just means consulting. So if you're consulting, then that typically means that you're going to be dealing with customers and you're going to have salespeople that are going to be trying to sell equipment. Well, if you're also trying to sell the services, supporting it, deploying it, things like that, uh, typically customers are going to be more likely to want to get their services and their support serviced by you, the value-added reseller or the VAR, because of the fact that you have certified engineers in those technologies. I hold a CCIE in route switch, I hold a CCNA in security. So that means I'm pretty good in the security realm. I'm really good in routing and switching. I'm pretty good in service provider. I'm okay in data center. I'm okay in wireless. So there's quite a few things that I can support and and efficiently, might I add. So a lot of that type of stuff is going to come into play, and you're going to look at it and be like, okay, um, what's next? What do I do? And that goes with Microsoft as well. Now, I'm not as familiar with Microsoft certs as VMware and Cisco because I don't have any Microsoft certs. Now, I know they do like an MCP, Microsoft Certified Professional. There might be a Microsoft Technology Associate, um, or something like that, where it's like you've taken one exam and you become proficient to the level Microsoft thinks you should be at. And then, of course, they have the umbrella certifications, the MCSA, the MCSE, and obviously these are different levels of complexity based off of what level you're going to be working at them at. And I would eventually like to take an MCSA in 2012 R2 and be really good in the server realm. I know from what I've heard, 2016 server is going to be mostly PowerShell, and I don't know PowerShell. Would it be hard to learn? No, not at all. It's really comes down to um, sitting down and taking the technology from the very, very basic fundamentals and working your way through to the more complicated things. And that's with any blueprint for any technology for any vendor. So it's not specific to Cisco, it's not specific to VMware. It just happens to be that I have chosen Cisco and VMware as my core competencies. So what is it that I normally do? Well, the first thing I do is I go out to the vendor's website and I download the blueprint. The blueprint is typically going to be in a PDF format. So what I'll do is for instance, I'm studying for CCNA wireless. I'm studying for CCNA service provider. I'm studying for CCNP wireless. I'm also studying for CCNP service provider. Now, with these two, this is a lot of information. Now, I'm much stronger on the SP side because of the fact that a lot of those technologies are relevant in the routing and switching track. Wireless, not so much. So what I'm doing right now is I'm spending the time learning the CCNA level stuff. So what is 802.11? What is a control frame? What is a management frame? What's a data frame? How do WILSIs work? What is the difference between a CAPWAP tunnel and um, another tunnel? Things like that. Why is CAPWAP so cool? What is Flex Connect? Things like that. It's wireless specific things. And it takes time to go through the material. So in order to be in my opinion, to be an efficient engineer, now, and I say this an engineer because what I do for a living requires me to be able to give advice to potential customers or on potential projects that I will more than likely be working on. So now let me kind of give you an idea of where I come from when I mean engineer. So let's say for instance, you are a guy that can keep things running and as long as nothing changes, you're okay. You fall into what I consider to be the technician slash administrator. Now, typically, a technician is going to be fixing computers, servers, things like that. You can do things that require hands-on, pulling out a hard drive and putting a new one in, reinstalling an operating system. You can you can bring a phone onto the network. You can, you know, I would say more administrative level things. You can do what they call moves. That was a horrible M. You can do moves, adds, and changes to things like Active Directory, Exchange, so on and so forth. Now, the main thing here that um, distinguishes a technician or an administrator from an engineer is and my role, depending on the situation, today I played both roles. So for instance, the administrator the administrator in me, because I wear multiple hats throughout the day and through the week and on different projects or at the same time for the most part. The administrator part of me had to troubleshoot why two T1s were not coming up on a router. Okay, well, administrators typically don't have and this is just my experience, and don't take this the wrong way if you're an administrator. I'm not trying to bash on anybody. I'm just the way I look at it. Typically, administrators aren't as technically advanced as engineers. Now, why do I say it that way? Because typically an administrator is going to keep what's already in place operational. An engineer is going to take what's already operational and make it better, make it more efficient, optimize it, potentially upgrade it, things like that. Engineers are going to do what administrators typically can't or are unable to do. And I used to be an administrator. For a long time, I was an administrator. I was good at it. And eventually I got to a certain point and I was like, okay, well, what's the next step? Well, instead of taking advice and deciding how I should move forward based off of somebody else's technical understanding of something, I now had the same level of technical understanding as that engineer. So now I was able to make the call. Now typically administrators flow in at the CCNA level, at the VCA level, at the MTA level. Engineers typically come in at the VCP level, the CCNP, the MCSA, where they've actually had implementation experience. They've actually deployed a bunch of routers and switches. They've deployed servers. They've deployed environments. They've also upgraded environments. They've upgraded routers and switches. Whether it's a code thing, they've added things to it, stuff like that. And a lot of what you're going to get when you get into engineering is the higher your technical understanding, the more likely you're able to be efficient in the engineering aspects of it. Now, that doesn't mean that, an administrator can't be a good engineer. That totally doesn't mean that. From when I going based off my personal experience as an administrator, as my job title, what I had to do every day was basically uh, basic things, nothing complicated. I would reach out to people if something wasn't working, and I would have them fix it. Well, eventually I got to the point where I didn't have to call them anymore. I could fix it. So that was where I started making the change and move into engineer. Well, you know, is that always the best move for everybody? Not always, but it does work. Now, when it comes to, and I have more experience on the Cisco side when it comes to certification, obviously, because I hold a CCIE, but one of the common things that people have a misunderstanding on is their approach to a certification. And the reason I say certification and not just technology is because most of the time, multiple technologies make up a certification. Now, me personally, my goal right now is I'm actually recording CCNA service provider right now and CCNP service provider. Eventually those videos will get rendered and then they will go live in INE's library. It does take some time though. It does take time to record these things and to make it worth the time to watch. So that's coming. I also have to study CCNA wireless. I hope to eventually um, do a entire video series on NA wireless and NP wireless. I like wireless. I think it's a very cool technology. Now, with that being said, in order for me to learn this stuff, I have to be really good in it before I can teach it, right? So basically, I have to be at an engineer's level to teach an administrator how to do something. That's the way I look at it. So I have to basically go through the content twice. So I have to know enough to pass the exam, but I also have to know more. I have to know all the things ahead of time before I can teach it. So that means right now, for instance, I'm learning IS to IS in detail. So I am taking the same approach to IS-IS that I did for OSPF. Now ask me a question about OSPF, I could probably answer it for you. Unless you're going very corner case or very specific, I might have to look it up. Now granted, one thing that most people have a misconception on is at CCIE, I can answer any question off the top of my head. For the most part, that's true. But there are going to be a lot of different things that are going to come into play that will have to sit there and go, okay, well, I think that's true. And because there's such a wide breadth and such a depth that I have to know things at, there are little itty bitty details that I can't always pull off the top of my head. I have to go, okay, why is the forward address set to this? Okay, that's because of this, and that's an OSPF thing with redistribution. But things like that come into play, and you're like, well, I'm not sure why that's doing what it's doing. But it's one of those things where it takes me a couple minutes, and I can just run through and go, okay, why is this doing that? If I have to stop a video and go look something up so I can answer a question, I'm not afraid to do that. Now, when it comes to doing that, there is a key factor to doing this. So here's what I'm doing right now. Because of the fact that I'm in the process of learning CCNA wireless, which is actually going quite smoothly, CCNA a service provider and CCNP service provider, so that I can get stronger in those areas. One of the common things that I do is, regardless of the track, I always start at CCNA. Even though I don't have to take the certification, because of my CCIE, it automatically basically says that I have enough theory to understand to be able to make up for that. So I automatically can start studying for CCNP. So, but what I ought to always do is I start at the CCNA level, even if I'm not very familiar with the technology, like data center or wireless. I always start off at the CCNA level because I'm not as strong in it. CCNA security, I already have it. So I don't really have to start there. I can start at CCNP security and work my way up. So what I normally do is I start there and then I work my way up to CCNP. And then I get into CCIE. What I'm currently doing, just so that I can become a better engineer, is instead of going NA to NP to IE in, say, service provider, data center, or wireless, or security for that matter, I've actually chosen to go NA to NP in SP, wireless, data center, and security. Now, why such a width? Because I work in these technologies and these topic domains on a regular basis. To me, it makes more sense right now for me to get wider and stronger than it is for me to go super deep. Because I know, and you can see over my right shoulder, it takes a long time to become a CCIE. Now, will I eventually become a CCIE in each one of these things? Probably. And the reason why? Because I like technology. I like the challenge. And then once when I'm here in the data center, I'll spend more time in the VMware side because, typically in the data center, once you have your UCS servers up and running, you're probably going to be running VMware on the server. Whether it's a UCS 200 chassis or it's a UCS 5108 B series blade. You know, there's multiple things that come into play with that. Now, granted, I'm just getting into data center, so if I'm incorrectly speaking of something, don't take my head off. I'm still learning. And that's one of the things that you have to understand too. When you're in technology, you're always in a constant motion of learning. There's always something new for you to know. So we have that. Another thing that's out there that most people are familiar with is the term of IWAN, Intelligent Wide Area Network. Now, IWAN is actually it's basically a technology umbrella, which basically incorporates DMVPN, PFR, V3, and what's the other one? I've heard zone-based firewall. I could be wrong on that, but that's basically from what I understand, that's what makes up DMVPN or IWAN. So what makes up DMVPN? Well, you have MGRE, you have, EIGRP, because I think EIGRP scales really, really well over DMVPN. Same thing with BGP. Scales really well over DMVPN. PFR, you can intelligently load balance over multiple things based off of your application level and visibility. And then zone-based firewall, turn the router into a firewall. Let's learn how to do that. So IWAN is made up of these three major technology areas. I'm pretty sure zone-based firewall is in there, but I'm going to learn zone-based firewall just because of the fact that I want to learn it. So DMVPN I am already familiar with. PFR and zone-based firewall, not so much. So one of the things I'm planning on doing is going through and learning IWAN. It's going to take some time, but eventually I'll become strong in IWAN. Now that requires me to get strong in PFR and zone-based firewall. So now, do I tackle IWAN from just tackle it? No, I don't. I take each piece of the technology umbrella and learn it individually. So I learned zone-based firewall. I learned how that works. I start playing with it, getting into the habit of doing things and learning how it operates, and watching some CCNP security or CCA security videos so that I can understand how the zone-based firewall works and get into the details. Then I start digging into PFR. How does PFR work? What does it do? Why does it do what it does? Then once I have that piece understood, I can then combine these guys to make up with the DMVPN. There's also multicast typically because of the fact that you have the ability with PFR or with IWAN to run multicast over DMVPN. So there's things like that come into play. So that's another major topic area that I want to learn. Now, once I have all these guys done, then I've got a CCNP in service provider. I have a CCNP, also CCDP. I want to become a design professional. So now you might say, well, why all the certifications? Well, it's not so much that I'm a cert junkie, but this way here, at least I have a validation to my technology understanding. Because even though, let's say for instance, in order for me to get this is 2016, let's say by 2020, so 4 years from today, I come back and I have a video that I do and I say, well, I'm a CCIE in route switch, because that's not going to change. I'm not going to lose that. But I've also got a CCNP in, let's say, service provider, wireless, security, data center, and design. Now, the way that I look at this is that's a pretty wide girth of, or pretty wide technology understanding. So then I'm going to be good in service provider, I'm going to be good in wireless, security, data center, design, pretty much all the technology domains. Maybe then I might tackle voice collaboration. I'm not sure yet, but that wouldn't leave a whole lot left to work on. That's going to be most of the tracks. Obviously, voice is going to be the only one that I haven't touched, but there's people that do that I don't have to worry about. So I'll let them deal with collaboration and voice. I'm not a big fan of making phones ring. I actually, though, personally, I would like to have a paging system in my house to where if, I'm in my home office, or if my wife is in, downstairs in the kitchen, she can just hit a button and it dials me up here, and we can talk to each other through the intercom system. That'd be kind of cool. Things like that. But beyond that, there's really nothing out there that I would really, for collaboration or voice, that I would really want to learn. It doesn't really interest me that much. Now, with that being said, I can do that, and then at the same point in time, none of these certification tracks actually cover IWAN specifically. Now, eventually, I'm pretty confident that in the next refresh of the CCIE, which should be coming, we're pushing 2 years now on the exam being live because it went live in June of 2014. I'm guessing another year or two, maybe, before CCA will get refreshed. And I have a very strong suspicion that IWAN will be on the next blueprint because of the fact that you've already got DMVPN in there. And if you are familiar with VRF aware DMVPN with what they refer to as front door VRF, you are already a good portion of the way because you can already run, and I do this in production all the time, so it's not really anything that would break the network or break NDA. I'm already quite a few things. Yeah, it's no secret that DMVPN is in the lab. I mean, you're gonna or in the written. So be sure you know DMVPN. But at the same point in time, because of the fact that I deal with IWAN, I wouldn't say a lot, but I'm familiar with it. Where I deal with a lot of the one company that we work with, they do a lot of dedicated internet for. They have a lot of different VRFs that they use for DMVPN. So I have a customer that does VRF aware DMVPN, and I'm the one that set it up. So I had to go in here and set it up in such a way that they'd be able to get these technologies to work because they're actually running multicast over DMVPN, and that's how I had to be familiar with it. So, but no certification track really covers it yet. Like I said, I have a sneaking suspicion that it's going to be in the next blueprint for the CCIE for the route switch track because they're already doing DMVPN. It wouldn't take much more to do IWAN, but you never know. So that's just what I think is going to happen based off of the technology push right now. So that's pretty much where I'm at with all of that. Now that's mostly Cisco. And that's mostly what I do. Now VMware, I hold a VCP in 5 and 6 for data center virtualization. Right? Pretty cool stuff. Now at the same point in time, I would like to get my VCAP in DCV. I would also like to get a VCP in network virtualization and desktop. I think VDI is pretty cool. But it takes time to get through that material. So let's say by 2020, and I don't think this right here, if I was to go after all these certifications by 2020, that's a lot. Because you figure, even if I go out and I get, this is 4 exams, this is 4 exams, this is 4 exams, 4 exams. Actually, I think this is 3 if I'm not mistaken. This is 1. So that means I'd have to take 4, 8, 12, 15, 16. I'd have to take 16 exams over the next 4 years, which means that would be 1 every 3 months. Now that's pretty, to me that's pretty aggressive. So I would more likely be, let's say 2022, I would be sitting at this rate right here. And maybe faster because that's just assuming that all I do is study the material and play around with it. Um, some might come faster than others. Data set or design, that's one exam. I had to go take the CCDP exam and I'm done. I've already got that. That's one of my future goals here. Wireless, I'm not that strong in, so I plan on definitely taking some time to go through that. Security, I can lab that up. I can buy a couple of ASAs and play with them here at my house. I plan on doing that actually. I have to go find some ASAs online, start playing with them. Now, here's my thing, and this is where I come from when it comes to technology learning. My thing right now is I want to learn individual technologies rather than start knocking out certifications. So, for instance, CCNA wireless. Obviously, there's not a ton to know, but I want to spend the time to know it. So anything CCNA level that I have to know, go ahead and just tackle it. Now, when it comes to the specifics, like service provider, I need to know ISIS. I already know BGP, but I need to know it to just a little bit different level. Um, a little bit more about it in areas that I didn't have to worry about it for routing and switching, like service provider specific things. So I'll be digging into those. Um, and then so I'm going to be taking a look at BGP at a little bit different of an angle, and that's also includes multi-protocol BGP. Now, once I have that, I also have to take a look at, once you get into like the advanced route exam, multicast. So I have to revisit multicast. I don't deal with it every day, maybe once a month, maybe. And all I have to do is turn PIM on an interface. So technically that's not really multicast if you ask me. I don't really have to do anything, just turn on PIM on an interface. As long as that router has a connection back to, and it's got IP multicast routing enabled globally, then you should be able to, and I'm not going to get into specifics, but my mind starts to wander when I start thinking about technologies and what I would have to do to get that router to be able to talk to the rendezvous point if you're doing sparse mode. Um, but if you're doing sparse dense mode, you can do things like auto RP and things like that. But so there's multicast to learn. And then once you get into that, then you have, and in the CCNP service provider, that's just for um, the SP route and the SP advanced route. Then you get into, say, things like the core, you're going to have things like quality of service to play with. Now, I haven't touched quality of service since before I studied for the CCIE, which is now almost 6 months ago. So there's a period of time that I've already gone through where I don't touch QoS very often. You know, there's maybe a little bit of shaping, but I don't go into any of the, going in and setting up AF41 or EF for, setting up prioritizing traffic. I don't do anything like that. None of my customer networks go that deep. There is some, but not to any real extreme level. But that means I'm gonna have to revisit QoS. So instead of studying for the certification, I download and understand everything I can possibly about the technology itself. Because I don't want to just be able to regurgitate information on a certification exam, pass it, and go, yay, I have a CCNP and service provider now, and then I get to go brag to all my friends. No, because at the end of the day, when I'm in the heat of the moment, when something's not working, maybe I have a customer on the phone and I have to come up with an answer, that certification to them means absolutely nothing. Now, and there's also an expectation that comes with that. When I passed my CCIE, there was an there becomes an expectation that when you have a CCIE, that you're going to be able to do things other people can't. And then when you can't do that, then people start to look at you kind of weird. Like you're this, Cisco god, you should be able to do it. Well, for most things, yes, when it comes to routing and switching. Now, with that being said, QoS, multicast, I didn't spend a ton of time on those areas because of the fact that I wasn't sure that they weren't core topics. Now, you talk about the core topics in the lab, I studied the ever-living crap out of those. But that means that I'm also really good with RIP, EIGRP, OSPF, BGP, MPLS, DMVPN. core technologies. So I knew them. When it came to things like PFR and um, layer 2 VPN and quality of service and multicast, not so much. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still studied them, but not to anywhere near detail that I needed to for the route switch exam. So that means that when I go back and I learn QoS, I really need to learn QoS, like to the point to where I don't have to think about it. I already know the answer. Same thing with what's the other one there? MPLS. I want to learn MPLS to a different level, and not just turning MPLS IP on at the interface level and letting some labels propagate. I'm talking about traffic engineering, understanding, what all the different aspects of it are. Because when you're dealing with the service provider environment, you get into things like QoS markings being carried from provider edge to provider edge. In a typical typical service provider environment, like the lab, the routing and switching lab, you're not worrying about that. You're not worried about that voice packet being carried from provider edge 1 through the MPLS core to provider edge 2 and that QoS marking being carried throughout the entire environment. I want to learn how to do that. So these are things that I'm, instead of being focused on the certification, I'm focused on the technology. Because if you're an expert in the technology, then the exam you shouldn't get tripped up on. There's actually an IEOC post this morning that I responded to, and when the poster or when the person requesting assistance posted it, it actually made me start to think, and I was like, well, that's actually a really good point. There really isn't any good documentation on that. So I keep up with the industry and what's going on and things like that. And one of the things that I realized pretty quickly was that as I'm going through and learning these technologies, I felt like I was going at it about the wrong way. And what do I mean by that? I was approaching them kind of in a brute force mentality. Just go hammer it out, and just go take the exam and hopefully you pass. I'm like, that's not how you do it. You know, and that's kind of how I approach CCNP and CCIE. I just kept on going over and over and over and over again. Once I had seen the lab for the CCIE for the first time, I memorized the topology and what the questions I saw. That's what I did. I came home and I just basically spun it up in GNS3 and I labbed every living snot out of it until I had it. Basically, I had all the answers. And then when I went back and took it a second time, things were a little bit different. It threw me off a little bit. So I took that experience, brought it home, labbed it up for a long time, went back, and I smashed the exam. I passed it. I think I had like 3 hours left when I finished. But that's kind of how I approached it. I took what I had seen, because by the third time it was the same as my second attempt, with the topologies from troubleshooting and configuration never changed. They were the same topology, just the configuration, depending on how they implemented things, slightly different. Um, they had moved a handful of little things around, but nothing that was going to catch me off guard. Just a matter of reading through the tasks and understanding what they wanted me to do. And once I read through the task, it took me about 25, 30 minutes to do that. Then it was like, okay, now I know what to do. Just now it was pull up Notepad, start typing my config in, drop it into the routers, and it was like things just started coming up like crazy. Before you knew it, I had most of everything operational. I had most of the lab done before lunch, and after lunch it was just a matter of coming back and getting everything else done. And I finished way early, but so I had lots of time to verify. And I verified, and they go on a point scale if you didn't know that. So in the lab you get 20 up to 24 points for troubleshooting. The config or diagnostic section is 6 points, so that brings you up to 30, and you get 70 total points for configuration. So if you're at the 60 point range in configuration and you got say 3 or 4 points in diag and you say maybe 15 to 18 points in troubleshooting, you're in pretty good shape. At least that's my experience. That's kind of how my lab played out. Um, and there's really no secret to that. But it's one of those things where, based off of what I had seen in the test and how things were laid out, I felt like I was in pretty good shape after that. and then from there it was just a matter of me, I was able to do it. But for me, it was I took what I'd seen, I brought it home, and I just labbed a little bit of snot out of what I'd seen until the point where I had it was like I knew what to type in. But your first attempt, you're not going to have that. You're going to go in there, and that's why a lot of people fail the first time. There are several people, and I know a lot of them personally. Um, there are. I'm not going to mention names or who they are or what they do, but there are one, two, three, four, three, four, five. I think there's 5 people. Could be wrong on that number. 4 people. 4 people in a group that I'm in that had passed the CCIE route switch lab on their first shot. Now that's a lot. That's saying a lot considering how difficult the exam is, but it's not impossible. There's people that go in there and pass it a lot, pass it all the time. Um, there's that one of those guys actually is a dual CCIE, and he passed his service provider and his route switch exam on the first shot. So, it is possible to be done. You just have to study for it. And that's where it comes down to, your preparation. So, and then one of the other things that I wanted to bring up was like with security. I want to learn ASA, then I want to learn IPS, then I want to learn ICE, then I want to learn ACS, then I want, stuff like that. And if you learn these technologies independently of each other, then you go in to apply them, then they'll make more sense because you'll know how they individually work and how they operate, then you'll be able to interoperate with them. That was kind of how I approached the lab. I learned, you know, EIGRP, then I learned, OSPF, then I learned BGP, then I learned DMBPN, then I learned MPLS, and I was able to start putting these, sort of layering things together. And I knew them so well that when it came to troubleshooting things, I knew what to look for. And that's mostly what the troubleshooting exam is all about. Whether it's, and I'm speaking more from the routing, the CCIE troubleshooting, as I haven't seen the CCNP troubleshooting exam in a while since I took it actually, and but it's one of those things where if you understand how that stuff works, you'll be in much better shape because then you know individually how everything works. Same thing with like data center. I don't know UCS at all. I mean, I know what it is, but beyond that, I've never worked with it. So I would learn UCS in detail. I would learn Nexus in detail. I would learn storage in detail. And then I would feel comfortable taking the data center exams and then going that route because to me, if you know UCS inside and out, you know Nexus inside and out, and you know storage inside and out, theoretically speaking, you should have no problem going in there and smashing that lab. But that's how I've started approaching things. I don't know if you know this or not, but INE has moved to um, a different style model to where they don't just teach certification-based training, and that's actually how they want me to for all their instructors and their authors is don't just teach the certification. You want to teach each of the technologies that's in the certification, and don't be afraid to go overboard. That's what I was told. And so what does that mean for you and I? Well, how deep do you want to go OSPF on the route exam? Well, for me, I like OSPF, so I'm going to go way deep. ISIS, same thing. ISIS is really, really cool once you start digging into it. So I'm spending the time to dig into the protocol. I don't know if you knew this or not, but you can actually run, and I shot a video on it, I think a couple weeks ago, for embedded packet capture, to where you can actually run the the packet capture between the router to see what's going on. I'm also looking at debugs. How does the protocol work behind the scenes? And then once I understand that, I can go ahead and move forward into other things like IPv6 in more detail, stuff like that. And that's really, at the end of the day, I find myself that much better at a technology when I know it that much that much deeper of a level than what the certification might require. I take it to the next level. And that to me is what changes me from an administrator to an engineer, because I know it better than most people will, which makes me able to answer questions that other people might not and go from there. Now I know I'm going into the 40-minute mark on this video, and I did not want to take this long, but I felt like I was on a good pace with what I was talking about, and things started making more sense. So take what you've got written on this board here and just use it as a kind of a guideline. That's what I do. Look at the blueprint for whatever you're doing, and then learn the individual technologies that make up that blueprint. So like when you understand storage, storage will make more sense to you. Same thing with, security. If you really know ASA, then you've already got a good portion of the security track already under your belt. If you need to learn IPS and ICE and ACS, go learn those protocols. If you need to learn 802.1x and play with it, do it. Learn that technology so that when you go take that test, you're not stumped by anything. Because then, at the end of the day, when things are going bad fast and you don't know which direction to turn, your technical expertise in that particular technology will help you troubleshoot whatever problem comes up. I can troubleshoot pretty much any BGP problem within just a couple of minutes. Let me look at it. Let me understand what's going on. Same thing with MPLS. Just the other day, a project manager for my company emailed me and said, this customer can't reach from site A to site B over our network. Like, okay, and it was a new deployment, new router. Like, all right, let me take a look at it. Come to find out that the PE to CE route that was sitting in between the two routers wasn't being advertised into BGP. Okay, it's a simple thing that was missed, but it has a devastating result. No reachability. So for me, it was a matter of turning around and just advertising the route into BGP. Well, guess what? They had reachability all of a sudden. I said, okay, try it now. And then, oh, yep, great, I can reach it. Simple thing. But it's knowing how things work on a per step basis, what to expect, why aren't things working. But you really won't learn that until you start digging into the technology. And now, granted, I know certifications are there to help validate that, but let's say you go out and you're a certification nut, you go get certified in every track Cisco has up to CCNP. It's great. You're a very wide, deep guy. That's great. But if I ask you a question about, let's say, ISIS designated intermediate system and its election policy and how it goes about doing that, you're going to be able to answer that question? If the answer is no, then that CCNP service provider exam or certification you have means nothing to me because you can't answer a simple question. So that's why I'm kind of more of an advocate to learning the technology over just going out and getting the certification. Because to me, knowing the technology is more valuable than having the certification. The certification was earned by as a byproduct of you knowing the technology. And that's one of those things where INE preaches this, and I live by it myself. They always say that they have the motto of they're experts at making you an expert, but they also state that if you start off with the fundamentals and you learn a technology like ISIS and you learn everything about that protocol. Now, that's just my approach, but you learn everything about that protocol, and before you know it, you know that protocol so well that when a question is asked in the exam, you already know the answer to it. Or you just got to read the answers and you're able to quickly eliminate, say, they give you 5 answers, you're quickly able to eliminate 3 or 2. And then you know the other, then you already have it, click, 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 done, and you're on to the next question. That's how I approach things nowadays. So leave your comments in the comments below. If you like the video, please like it. If you would like to subscribe, I'm trying to do more of these style videos as we progress through here. And I am going to be doing individual snippet videos to where I still do the how-to stuff. I've just been really busy lately. And I also will do specific videos on a specific technology. How do you get zone-based firewall to work? That type of stuff. And they're going to be short videos. It's definitely not going to be a lot of series-based stuff. A lot of that stuff goes to INE because they get first dibs on all that type of stuff. But that's enough ranting from me. I hope everything you've seen in this video has been valuable and you take it to heart. and hopefully something made sense to you and you find it valuable. I hope that this was informative for you, and I would like to thank you for viewing.